The town of Ravenbrook slept under a silver moon. Narrow streets lay quiet, and the soft hum of streetlights echoed through the empty lanes. Houses stood still like dark silhouettes against the sky. Inside, families dreamed peacefully, unaware that something terrible was about to happen. Daniel Cross's small house stood near the end of Willow Lane. His lights were off. He had gone to bed early after another long day at work. The air was cold, drifting through the open window near his bed. He turned once, twice, and finally sank into deep sleep. Across the neighborhood, a clock struck 2. The sound echoed faintly through the night. Everything seemed calm until a single dog began to bark somewhere far off, sharp, nervous barks that broke the stillness. The town remained silent otherwise, holding its breath. For years, Ravenbrook had been known as a safe and friendly place. People left their doors unlocked. Children played on the streets till late evening. But before dawn arrived, all that peace would be gone. Within hours, the people of Ravenbrook would wake to flashing sirens, screams, and a single headline that would change everything. The Sleepwalking Killer strikes in Ravensbrook.
At exactly 2:47 a.m., a piercing scream shattered the silence of Ravenbrook. Curtains flew open along Willow Lane as sleepy neighbors rushed to their windows. The scream came from the home of Clara Mitchell, a 34-year-old woman who lived alone right next door to Daniel Cross. Within minutes, the street filled with confused faces and flickering phone lights. Someone called the police. Others whispered to one another, afraid to go closer. When the police arrived, they found Clara lying motionless on her living room floor, blood spreading slowly across the white tiles. There were no signs of a break-in, no shattered glass, no forced lock. The front door was unlocked from inside, as if she had opened it herself. And then, someone noticed a man standing just a few feet away, barefoot, his pajamas stained with red. His eyes were wide open, but unfocused, his face pale under the flashing lights. It was Daniel Cross. When an officer called out to him, he didn't respond. He just looked down at his trembling hands and whispered, "What happened to Clara?" The police quickly surrounded him. Daniel didn't resist. He looked lost, like a man who had woken from a nightmare he couldn't remember. Inside the house, forensic officers began their work. They found bloody footprints leading from the victim's home straight to Daniel's back door. But there was no weapon, no motive, only confusion. As dawn broke over the quiet town, Daniel sat handcuffed on the porch, staring blankly at the horizon. Reporters had already begun gathering outside the yellow police tape. The town's peace had been broken forever. And so began the mystery of the sleepwalking killer.
Morning light crept slowly across the police station windows as Detective Sarah Miles entered the interrogation room. Daniel Cross sat alone at the table, his head bowed, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept for days. Sarah placed a file in front of him and spoke softly. "Daniel, do you know why you're here?" He lifted his head, his voice trembling, barely more than a whisper. "They said Clara's dead." Sarah watched him closely. "You were found outside her house, Daniel. Your hands were covered in her blood. Can you tell me what happened?" Daniel shook his head slowly, confusion clouding his face. I don't know. I went to bed early. I remember closing my eyes, then waking up outside. I don't remember going anywhere." Sarah studied him carefully. His tone wasn't defensive. It was calm, broken, almost childlike. She had seen liars before. This man didn't look like one. Across the table, a second officer entered and placed a photo in front of Daniel. It showed the bloody footprints leading from Clara's house to his own back door. Daniel's lips trembled. "Those are mine," he admitted. "But I didn't do anything. I swear, I didn't." Later in her office, Detective Miles reviewed the reports. There was no sign of forced entry into Clara's home, and the murder weapon was missing. The only evidence pointed to Daniel: his fingerprints, his footprints, his blood-stained pajamas. But one detail stood out: a small medical wristband Daniel wore that recorded his sleep patterns. The data showed intense REM activity around 2:30 a.m., right when Clara was killed. Sarah frowned, staring at the file. "He was in deep sleep, but somehow awake," she muttered to herself. For the first time in her career, she faced a question that science could barely answer. Could a man kill while he was asleep?
Detective Sarah Miles sat at her desk late into the night, reading through Daniel Cross's medical records. The deeper she went, the stranger the case became. Daniel had been treated for a rare sleep disorder since childhood, chronic parasomnia, a condition that caused him to walk, talk, and act out dreams without waking. There were old hospital notes. Patient found outside at 2 a.m., unaware of location. Another note said, attempted to open front door during sleep. The next morning, Sarah visited Daniel's mother, a frail woman with trembling hands and a face marked by years of worry. "He's not a bad man," she said quietly. "He's just broken when he sleeps." She told Sarah how when Daniel was 10, he once wandered outside in the snow, wearing only his pajamas. They found him 2 blocks away, shivering and confused, with no memory of it. Later, Sarah spoke with Dr. Helen Voss, a neurologist who had treated Daniel years ago. The doctor explained, "Sleepwalking is more common than people think, but violent behavior during it, that's almost unheard of. It's possible, but very rare." Sarah asked, "Could someone commit murder and not remember it?" Dr. Voss hesitated. "In theory, yes, but it would require extreme triggers, stress, medication, or trauma. The brain acts awake, but the person is still dreaming." Sarah left the clinic deep in thought. Daniel had no history of violence. He was quiet, kind, and solitary. Everyone described him as gentle, the kind of man who fed stray cats and helped neighbors fix fences. So how could such a man kill in his sleep? That night, Sarah sat alone in her office, looking at a photo of Daniel standing outside Clara's house, barefoot and blank-eyed. She whispered to herself, "If he didn't do it on purpose, then who or what made him do it?" Outside the station window, the wind howled through the streets of Ravenbrook, as if the town itself held secrets it didn't want to share. Within days, the story of Daniel Cross spread like wildfire. News channels repeated his name, and the words, "The Sleepwalking Killer," flashed across every television screen in Ravenbrook.
Reporters camped outside the police station. Talk shows argued whether he was a murderer or a victim of his own illness. Some people called it a tragedy. Others called it an act of pure evil. At first, a few neighbors defended Daniel. They told the media he was a quiet, gentle man who wouldn't hurt anyone. But soon, fear took over compassion. Rumors began to twist the truth. Children whispered his name like a ghost story. Shops put up signs saying, "We don't serve killers." Outside the courthouse, people protested with banners that read, "Killers never sleep in."
Murder is murder. Sleepwalking is no excuse. Inside, Daniel sat in his cell, staring at the small window. Every night, he asked the guards the same question. Did I really do it? Detective Sarah Miles felt torn. The evidence against him was solid, his footprints, fingerprints, and blood. Yet every instinct told her something didn't add up. Sleepwalkers didn't plan. Sleepwalkers didn't choose victims. But Clara Mitchell's murder looked too clean, too specific. It didn't feel like an accident. Meanwhile, Daniel's lawyer requested a full sleep study before the trial, hoping to prove his condition was real. The court agreed, and Daniel was transferred to a special medical facility for observation. For several nights, doctors watched him through cameras as he slept. He moved in his bed, mumbled words, even sat up and looked around, eyes open but empty. One night, he stood up suddenly and whispered, "Don't open the door. They'll see me." The doctors noted every movement carefully. Detective Sarah Miles stood behind the observation glass, watching the man who might have killed in his dreams. She whispered to herself, "If he's not faking, then someone else is pulling the strings." The question that haunted her most wasn't whether Daniel was guilty, but who wanted to make him look that way. 2 weeks passed after Daniel's arrest. The people of Ravenbrook slowly began returning to their normal routines, though fear still lingered in every quiet street. The police thought the nightmare had ended, until another scream tore through the night. It was just after 2:30 a.m. when officers were called to an apartment across town. The victim was Mark Turner, Daniel's co-worker from the construction company. He was found dead in his living room, killed in the same brutal manner as Clara Mitchell. Detective Sarah Miles rushed to the scene. When she arrived, the officers were pale and shaken. "You won't believe this," one of them said quietly. "Daniel Cross's DNA is here. Same fingerprints, same footprints near the body." Sarah froze. Daniel was still locked up at the sleep facility miles away. It was impossible, or so she thought. The security cameras outside Mark's building showed something disturbing. At 2:36 a.m., a figure walked down the street barefoot, wearing loose pajama pants, just like Daniel. The man's movements were slow and dreamlike, but as Sarah watched the footage closely, she noticed something else. Another figure appeared a few seconds later, a shadowy person, dressed in similar clothes, walking a few steps behind the first. Their face was hidden under a dark hood. Sarah replayed the footage again and again, her mind racing. "That's not Daniel," she whispered. "It can't be."